You hear me now?
Yes, but say testing. Fred.
1, 2, 3.
Yeah, say it some more. It's not completely clear. Let me hear.
1, 2, 3. How much wood could a woodchuck chuck if a woodchuck?
It's cutting out.
Okay.
Oh, it might not be your fault, Fred. It might be something happening over here with Augustus.
How about now? Is this any better?
It's wonderful. It's wonderful now.
Okay. I don't know what the problem was, but
Okay. No problem now.
are we transmitting? Are people all over the world looking at us?
No, it's not streaming yet.
Okay.
No, it's not streaming yet. Oh, there are people in chat though, but I can't chat because I'm not allowed to get into YouTube. But I can see the other people chatting.
Who allowed us to get into YouTube?
Well, for the usual reason, they kicked me off.
Kick you off
Yeah, for no reason.
just now?
No, a year ago.
That's
You know,
not lovely.
they do that all the time.
I don't even know who you are right now.
They know enough. Okay, Barbara's talking. Vanessa Schubert is talking. Okay, Vanessa Schubert. Okay, Vanessa Schubert says that your mic, Fred. Vanessa, do you still say that Fred's mic is too close to his mouth? Vanessa Schubert, do you still say that Fred's mic is too close to his mouth, or has he fixed the problem? Is everybody happy with Fred's mic? Say something, Fred.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10.
Okay. Yes.
Can't hear you.
Okay, I just want to say one thing to Fred. Fred, move your mic about a half an inch up from your mouth. Just a little. Okay, thank you. Okay, thank you, Vanessa. Okay. Vanessa is Gus's mother.
Right.
Okay.
I didn't get one. Thank you. That is correct. I didn't copy that. Am I ready to start? Is that what you said? Okay, okay, very good. Madam Chairman, Augustus, Bobby, Moen, and all of the inventors of Missouri, I thank you for the opportunity to be here, and also to the people throughout the world that are listening to this broadcast. And with that, I guess we can start. I don't know what to do with it, but hold on. Is that better? Okay. I mean, the mic is part of a headset. I can't get it a great distance from my face. I, s- I can use the microphone in the camera if that would help. But, okay. Right. At any rate, we're looking here at a photo, high altitude aerial photograph of Boston, Massachusetts, where I started work. I started out as an engineer working for a company called Northeast Aerial Photos, which was a wholly owned subsidiary of Northeast Airlines, which is now defunct. And I was hired as technical director. And what I was supposed to do was take old World War II cameras that we used to take pictures from aircraft and modify them by putting new lenses on them. The lenses that were on the cameras were not good lenses. They were the best we had at the time during World War II. But in 1951, the diffraction limited lens was invented, and that's the top uh, of the optics design and polishing of lens manufacturing that we have today. And I modified these old cameras by putting new lenses on them. And I beg your pardon, you can't hear me? All right, is better? Okay, I'll speak louder then. At any rate, I modified these cameras by putting modern lenses on them. Now, this is another photograph that we're looking at. It's the Boston Shoe Machinery Building in United Shoe Machinery Building here in Boston. And uh, I that has a unique story because uh, the building was originally photographed. Yes, I'm back on. All right. The building was originally photographed by a gentleman named Leslie R. Jones, who was the staff photographer for a Boston newspaper, the Boston Herald. And he photographed it from a parapet on the Custom House, which was that tall building we saw in the original photograph. Well, this is a picture of the building while it was being constructed, which he also took. And if we can move on to the next picture. I did a lot of my work from an airplane and also from helicopters. But I will mention with the United Shoe Building, I was originally asked, the company I was at that I was working for was asked to duplicate a photo that was taken by Leslie Jones of the United Shoe Building. Uh, it's an impossible photograph to duplicate. Yes, okay, okay. Could it be a problem with the microphone? You want me to try to use the microphone on my camera? Yes. I'll say 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Okay. All righty. At any rate, I was asked to duplicate a photo of the United Shoe Building, which is that building we were looking at, but it's not possible to duplicate that photograph because the State Street Bank was built in between the two buildings. And I was asked to take a picture from the same place. I went that the day that I was supposed to do that. I went up to the top of the custom house, and they let me out at lunchtime, and they locked all the doors. And I was to take the picture and come down at 1 o'clock after the lunch hour was over. Well, I had a problem because since Leslie Jones had been up there, they had built the concrete block wall. They had put barbed wire up there, and it wasn't possible to take the picture from his vantage point. So I had to climb over the barbed wire. I had to climb over the cement block wall, and I was standing on a little 6-inch ledge, and I worked my way all the way down to the corner of the building to duplicate the photo. And the reason why they put this concrete block wall up there and the barbed wire was because it used to be a favorite spot of jumpers in Boston. They used to jump off the building to commit suicide. And I was taking pictures of this build of the State Street Bank building, which was blocking uh, the photograph to take the United Shoe building. And I looked down and there's a crowd gathered beneath me and they're hollering, "Jump! Jump! Jump!" Well, needless to say, the police had been called, the fire department had been called, and when they were told that I was supposed to be up there, nobody was worse for the wear. But that was a very interesting experience to be up on the top of a building, have somebody down in the crowd hollering, "Jump!" Well, moving on from there, here, this is a picture of a small airplane. It happened to be a Piper Super Cub. And I did a lot of flying in these aircraft and taking pictures from these aircraft. Hopefully with a pilot. There's no pilot in this one. I'm not quite sure where he went, but it's probably the man in the back. Here's the same aircraft on the ground. And this is the type of camera that I modified. This is a Fairchild camera. They were fairly heavy. This camera weighs 25 or 30 pounds. And here's another one. The cameras are also, they're handheld, and they're also mounted in the aircraft, in a hole in the aircraft on the bottom of the fuselage, where they're mounted on gimbals, so they remain level and they're used for mapping purposes with an intervalometer. An intervalometer is a timing device that allows you to take pictures at certain time periods. And normally, for doing this work, they took pictures depending upon the speed of the aircraft. They took pictures so you got a third overlap. And they cut these pictures and they pasted them down, so you got what was known as a mosaic, like this picture we're looking at here, and the next picture. You can see where they join the photographs. It enables them to make a large mural. Here's another one. The edges are ragged because the photos are not totally in alignment. And normally what would happen if they were going to use this photograph or something, they would trim the edges off to square it off. But this photo is made up of a lot of smaller photos. Now, this is another mosaic. You can see the lines where it was joined. This shows you a third and a third and a third. It's the center third of each negative and print that we use to make this mosaic. This one only has 3 pictures. This is a pair of stereo glasses. They're magnifiers. They're used for looking at stereo photos when they're taken. That's 2 photos taken at some distance apart to be what we call an interocular, or the eye distance of the human body. And these allow us to see the actual photographs taken in 3 dimensions. So we can actually see depth. Well, I guess we moved on to that. Now we're looking at a conventional marine sextant. This happens to be a brass one. It's used for navigational purposes, and that's the second thing that I began doing. I was designing navigational equipment that were used by the Navy and by people that needed to navigate on board ship or in aircraft. Here we have, this is a plot marine sextant. It's just like the other sextant we saw, except that this is it's a more useful one. The other was more decorative. As you can see, the sextant. Could you go back again to the other picture, the one previous to the, yes, the sextant? You see through the telescope. We look down into a mirror that's half mirror and half no mirror, and that allows us to sight with the telescope, and we adjust the arm of the telescope, and the mirror that's at the pivot point of the arm, we actually bring a star down, and it appears to sit on the horizon in the horizon glass, which is the mirror glass that it's forward on the device. Okay, now for aircraft use, this is again a plot sextant, but this has been modified with a monocular, and that brass box that you see instead of the horizon mirror contains a bubble level. And this is used when you're in an aircraft and you don't have the horizon to sight on. you actually put the image in the center of a bubble. And normally this is a device that was designed for aircraft navigation. It's a Mark 7 aircraft sextant. It was designed in the early 30s, and this is the one that was used by Lindbergh when he did all the mapping of Pan American Airways for all their South American routes. It has a bubble level, no horizon. This is an officer on board one of the Zeppelins that made the trip from Germany to the United States. He has a mirror on the set on a conventional marine section, and he's making a sun sight. This is probably the Zeppelin he was making a sight from. It's a picture of the Zeppelin over Manhattan. You can see they were beautiful aircraft. This is a periscopic sextant. The purpose of the periscopic sextant was to protect the navigator. When they went to pressurized aircraft, the navigator normally made his sights through a glass bubble on the top of the aircraft. It was actually plastic or plexiglass. And he made his sights through that. He sighted a star and aligned it with the bubble. The problem is when they began to pressurize the aircraft, the pressurization damaged the bubble and blew the bubble off the aircraft, and some of the navigators were actually sucked out. So in order not to lose navigators, what they did was they created this periscopic sextant. The mount was in the aircraft, the navigator used the sextant, which used this type of sextant, which stuck through the skin of the aircraft, and he could actually sight on a star without seeing the sky. So this is the same type of sextant that was made in England. This is a Smith sextant. The one we just looked at was a Carlsbad sextant, which is an American periscopic sextant. Oh, and this is a B-29 bomber. It was the first pressurized aircraft bomber. There's no bubble on the top of it, as you can see, but it was the first modern aircraft. And in a moment, we're going to see what it looks like inside the cockpit. I guess we lost that. There we are. This is what the cockpit looked like in the B-29, the first modern aircraft. This happens to be a picture of the Enola Gay, which is the aircraft that dropped the atomic bomb on Hiroshima. Okay. Now this is a Norden bomb site. This was used during World War II. It was supposedly the most highly kept secret during the war. This probably, although this is what they claimed it would do, it would drop a bomb into a pickle barrel at 20,000 feet. In actuality, it wasn't that good, not because of the design of the bomb site, but because of the fact that you have to take into consideration wind, drift of the aircraft, etc. And all this information couldn't be programmed into the bomb site because the wind directions and the wind speeds changed at different elevations. So if you were at 20,000 feet, there might be 4 or 5 different directions and speeds of winds that your bomb would go through after you dropped it. But as I said, this was the most highly classified device during the war. This is a picture of a modern bomber. I say modern, it's a B-52. We've had them since the end of World War II, the Strategic Air Command, and it's doing carpet bombing. Now, we have the system that we were using at one point was called the Triad. That was to protect the United States. The SAC, the Strategic Air Command, had B-52 bombers that were flying 24 hours a day. They flew to fail-safe points and then turned around and came back. They were always within 500 miles or so of their targets. In addition to the SAC bombers, we had land-based missiles. Originally, they were located in missile silos in fixed positions, and some of them eventually became mobile and they could drag them around behind a truck. This was done so that the enemy, which at this point was which would have been the Russians, they wouldn't have necessarily known where the missiles that were being moved around would be coming from. And we also had the submarine missiles, which were fired from onboard submarines at various points. These were better because the enemy wouldn't know where they were, and they wouldn't necessarily know where they were coming from when they were fired. This is some photographs of some missiles. These were fired from aircraft. So there's a submarine missile being fired. Now the interesting thing is, while I was working on the navigational hardware, and I was working on a computerized sextant for the U.S. Navy, I gave a speech. I gave a talk at the Air Force Academy at the Institute of Navigation meeting with the chief physicist for the U.S. Navy and the chief astronomer for the U.S. Navy. And while I was there, I spoke to some of the Air Force colonels and generals about coming up with a better system to protect the United States. And I was talking about a guided bomb, which we use today, but they hadn't thought about in those days. And the guided bomb would have been carried under the wings of a B-1 bomber. Now it probably would have been a B-2 bomber. They never did. They never did implement this program. I suggested we use a computerized bomb site, which was a celestial bomb site. An aircraft would come in at low altitude, would fly to some point that was within 500 miles of multiple targets. It would then gain altitude. The bombardier or the navigator would sight on 3 stars. It would automatically do the reduction of those stars. That means when you reduce 3 star sites, it tells you where you are, your latitude and longitude. That information would be programmed immediately into these guided bombs that were under the wings of the B-1 bomber. When the bombs were launched, they would have a much shorter distance than any of the intercontinental IBM missiles would have had to go. Most of the travel would have been almost directly downward, so the enemy would not have any time to acquire the missile on radar to stop it. And it would travel for such a short time period. It would travel for 8 to 10 minutes, as opposed to 45 minutes to an hour if they were launched from the United States or from a submarine. But I was told that the military couldn't talk to me, and they couldn't talk to me for a very good reason. I didn't have security clearance to talk about this project. The project didn't yet exist, so if the project were to exist, I would have to get clearance. But since it didn't exist, it was not possible to get clearance, and since it was not possible to get clearance, they weren't able to talk to me. So it's kind of like a catch-22 situation. They couldn't talk to anybody about protecting the country because nobody knew what the devil I was talking about. It was so new that nobody had created the project yet. Suffice it to say, it never happened. There was no celestial bomb site, and we're still back in the Dark Ages. So this, and as I say, the celestial bomb site would have been a sextant combined with a computer that would have programmed the missiles on, or the guided bombs on where they were before they were launched. They would have a very short time to get to target and almost a downward path. So it would have been a lot safer and a lot cheaper than what we have now. Okay, now we get to another interesting part in my engineering history, making execution equipment. And I was asked, and leave this one up for a few minutes. I was asked in the 60s about in the late 60s about an electric chair that was in the Massachusetts State Prison. Now, there had been a moratorium on executions throughout the country. Nothing to do with the equipment, it only had to do with the application of the law. But the Supreme Court struck all of the laws down, and it took a good number of years before they reinstituted capital punishment laws. And when they did, they faced a problem. All of the equipment they had was old, obsolete, and was untrustworthy. None of the people that worked at the prisons had ever seen an execution, and all of the people it had were either dead or retired. So it presented a major problem because they had equipment that wouldn't work, and they had nobody that would have known how to run it if it did work. Well, this picture we're looking at here happens to be a gallows that I constructed. This was for the state of Delaware. They constructed the wooden frame. I was responsible only for the design of the mechanism that dropped the gallows door. This is another view looking up the stairs. It was a conventional gallows built according to the unwritten law of 13 one-foot high steps going up to a 13-foot platform above the ground. And the 13 feet have to do with the 13 pieces of silver that Judas received for selling Christ out. That is the lever for dropping the trap door. In a moment, you'll see a very unique mechanism that I made. This is the release mechanism. There were no hooks or anything else. It consisted of two pillow blocks that pulled back. The door rested on it had a Teflon bar underneath it, and the pillow block slid very easily back and dropped the trap door. And as you can see, we had just dropped the sandbag. That's what the picture is. But and this is my manual for execution by hanging. It's been used twice since I wrote it. Hanging is not a popular mode of execution today. It was used once in Delaware and once in Washington. This is the procedure for tying a hangman's knot, which probably also is a lost art. How we get to electrocution. This is a picture of the first electric chair. It was used on Wilhelm Temler in 1890. It's considerably similar and also considerably different from what was later used. It had a headpiece which actually has been replaced by a helmet. Here it looks like a toilet plunger hanging from that crosspiece. And also in the seat, if you look in the back of the seat, there's an electrode there was a spine electrode. The electrode consisted of a piece of copper screening with sponge sewn onto it. The sponge was wet in salt water. The spine electrode was held on by a belt, much the same as we use to hold up our pants, and the head electrode was pressed down tight onto his head. That likewise was wet with salt water for conductivity. Now, if you move along, that chair was used once, just on Wilhelm Temler. This is the Massachusetts electric chair, built in 1900. It's the design or the image of most electric chairs. It has a leg stock at the bottom, which holds the man's legs steady. The man is strapped in. There's a backrest. There's straps for the arms, straps across the chest. And there's a leather helmet that's used on his head. It's a leather helmet that's lined with a copper screening and sponge, which is wet with salt water. And the legs are strapped in. And there was a leg electrode that was fastened onto his leg. It simply consisted of a piece of leather with a strap on it so you can buckle it around the man's calf. It had a copper screening and a sponge inside, and the ground was connected to the electrode, and the current was brought in through the individual's head and the helmet. This is a picture of the switchboard that controlled the electric chair in Massachusetts. You'll notice there's two switches and there's 2 meters up top. 1 meter reads voltage, the other meter reads current amps if you will, and the 2 switches control Either one. One controls voltage, one controls amperes. This is a picture of the death chamber. The door is the door that's open with the bars. That goes out to 3 execution cells where they held the inmates before the execution. And again, you can see the switchboard to the right. You know, if you notice, it's very interesting. When electrocution was started, most places didn't have electric lights. They just had gas lights. And if you'll notice, there's a gas pipe coming from the wall over the meters on the switchboard. And they didn't have lights on the switchboard until later. There's 2 lights, one on each thing. The original system called for a gas light to light up the switchboard so they could use electricity to execute someone, which is really funny. You'd think they'd have put lights in at the same time. Okay, next picture. This is a picture of the Tennessee electric chair. It's not, I made a complete system for Tennessee, and they sent me this electric chair because I had to take a couple of pieces of wood from this chair and incorporate them into the new chair which I built. The reason for that is because this chair is built out of oak from the original gallows that they had in Tennessee, and it was a matter of tradition. And as a result, I did incorporate the wood, and this is the chair that they sent me. It was the chair that they had used up until recently. Now, if you go over the next picture, this is also a picture of the Tennessee electric chair. But if you take a good look at it, you can see there's a human face in it. There are also hands in it, and this picture was authenticated by Eastman Kodak. It was essentially an accident. As any good engineer does, before I took the chair apart, I photographed it. And after I took a lot of photos of it, and after I took the photos, my ex-wife's son was interested in photography, and he asked me about curly photography, which is photographing auras around people. And I said, well, you might be able to find an aura in the chair around the leg where the leg electrode fit, and around the head where the head electrode fit. And I told him to take the time exposures in complete darkness. He made several exposures. I think he made 5 or 6 of them. None of them had anybody in it except this one. And this was an accident. He accidentally tripped the ceiling light for less than a second. And by doing that, it brought up the images of somebody who's still in the chair. And if you look closely, you can see that the person whose head is in the picture was executed before they put the backrest on it, because the backrest is inside his body. It's a very interesting picture. I cannot speak for what's really in the chair. All I can say is that it made an interesting picture. Eastman Kodak had no way to explain it. There are also several orbs over the picture that anybody who's taken pictures sometimes notices they get in graveyards and such at night. So, okay, this is the new Tennessee electric chair. It is considerably different from what was used in the past. The headpiece or the helmet is sitting in the middle of the chair. It has a face curtain on it that snaps onto the helmet, either front or back, because the helmet is bilateral. You can use the front for the back and the back for the front, depending upon which side you want the latch for the strap. The chair, I had to paint the chair because the original oak from the Tennessee chair was over 100 years old, and it was so hard that I had difficulty cutting it. I couldn't stain it. I couldn't match it to any of the new oak. And what I had to do was I finally had to paint it. The paint on it is paint that's used on a space shuttle. It withstands the heat of a re-entry and the fire of the re-entry. And I used that because I didn't want the paint to burn or come off when an electrocution was in progress. Now, if you'll also notice at the leg stalks are somewhat different. I've changed the way that the electric chair is set up. I ground both legs instead of just one leg. My electrodes are fastened into that leg stalk instead of being separate. The original type of electrode that was used would slide down the leg toward the ankle when the execution was going on because the person was shaking and vibrating. And when that happened, it caused a high resistance connection, sparking, and a lot of burning of the tissue on the leg. But with these new electrodes, the ankles were strapped in firmly and tightly into the electrodes. The straps that I use are non-incremental. They're the same straps that are used in your car. On these straps, particularly used in aircraft harnesses, so they're much stronger than what you use in your car. But at any rate, they're non-incremental, which means they're not like a belt that has holes in it. You can tighten these up linearly, and they can stop at any point. The backrest, if you look at the top of the backrest has an adjustment on the top of the chair, and you then can push the backrest forward and tighten the individual up against the over the chest harness, which I use, which is the same as they use in aircraft. If you hit the front of the strap, it opens up, so it makes it easier to take the person out of the electric chair. This is a picture of the electric chair control. It's operated by two people. It's computerized. The computer makes a decision on which switch is going to turn the chair on, and there's a fully automated sequence of the execution. There's 2 jolts of electricity, each jolt being 2,640 volts to compensate for the voltage drop. We don't want to get under 1,500 volts ever. We want to keep it, if possible, around 2,000 volts. The current is on for 1 minute, and then it shuts off for a 10-second cooling period, and then it turns on again for another 1 minute, and then it shuts down permanently. And as you can see, the chair is in a different room from the control. This is the execution room, and you can see the control out in the execution chamber through that little window. This is a close-up. You can see the light tells when the chair is energized. You can tell when the system is on. There's a switch for the switches are all controlled by key. There's a switch for a key switch for controlling operation and test, and the 2 buttons on the left. There's a signal, double, and there's a light to indicate when they're on. The switches are on either side of the green light. There's a picture of the chair in the execution chamber with the electric chair control. And I think, as many of you know, I went to Auschwitz and Birkenau and Majdanek a number of years ago as an adjunct to Ernst Zundel's defense team in Canada. I went there as an expert witness for the court to make a determination if there were gas chambers in Poland utilized by the Germans during the war. My inspection determined that they weren't. But this system, which was placed and is still in place in Tennessee, has been modified by a fellow who, this is a good shot of the leg stock showing their solid naval bronze. They weigh about 20 pounds apiece. My system was modified. There is a helmet. The system was modified by a gentleman who was deceased. He made the electric chair in many of the southern states, particularly Florida, where they set Mr. Jesse Tafaro's head on fire. So at any rate, they modified the chair. They changed the voltages and the times, and they've used it twice. Unfortunately, it hasn't malfunctioned due to the new electrodes and the approach of how it works. But looking at that picture of the chair again, you can also see a couple of other innovations. The seat of the chair is made out of plexiglass. There's a lot of holes. There's a pattern of holes drilled in it. And underneath the seat, there is a large plastic pan and also a piece of plexiglass that holds it. When you execute someone, he usually loses control of his bladder. He urinates, and the urine runs through and fills that tray. And it used to be dangerous in the past because the urine used to get on the floor. Urine is highly conductive, and if they were doing a multiple execution, the guards used to have to be concerned about walking through the urine while an execution was in process. So now we're looking at the helmet again. You can see it looks something like an old football helmet. You can see the snap. There's a snap on either side, one in the front, one in the back for the face curve. There's a large there's a thumb screw on the top, which is actually a palm screw. To connect the wire, that's the electricity comes in through that wire, and there's even a hole for an Allen wrench to fit on the top to make it easy to remove it. Now the helmet, most of the helmets in the past, and most of the electrodes that have been used in the past, are soldered. That's not a good idea because there's an intensive amount of heat that's generated during an execution, and solder melts. I have some pictures of the Massachusetts chair, helmet, which we'll look at in a minute, and you'll see where the solder had melted, and also the screening had been damaged, and it actually came apart. Can we bring up that picture, Mona? Yeah, this is the back view this is my helmet. Okay, let's go on to the next one. Another view. This helmet consists of two helmets, an outer helmet of leather, and an inner helmet of sponge, copper mesh or screening, and artificial sponge. I do not use natural sponge because it varies in thickness. This helmet can be disassembled, and you can see where you can open it up. There's a 1/4 screw underneath that. You can unscrew it, take it apart, and clean the mesh, and then put the helmet back together. I do not use solder because the solder presents a high resistance connection and may melt. And if we move on to here's the Massachusetts helmet. This is the inside of it. You can see how the sponge is sewn and how uneven it is. Now, if we look at the next one, we'll see it apart. You can see the actual solder joint up at the top of the leather helmet where it broke the screen. And here's the other helmet. And another view, we're going to see where the screen was. When you flip it over, you can see the screen. Here's the screen with the piece torn out of it because of the way the helmet was fabricated. So, this is the power supply for the Tennessee electric chair. It's got a voltmeter, it's got an ammeter, it's got circuit breakers on the front. It is not fused. It is not fused because you don't want a fuse to blow during an execution. You can see the power comes in from that master disconnect above the power supply. This is a test unit for Tennessee electric chair. There's a number of large resistors, those black things that go up and down. There's two banks of them. There's a number of large resistors which simulate the resistance of the human body. And this is plugged in. This is the back view with the fans that cool the resistors during the test. The test is for 1 minute on, 1 minute off, the same as we would do if we were doing an execution. This is the front page of the manual that defines how the chair operates, how to repair the chair if there's a problem, and how a proper execution is conducted. It explains that during an electrocution, unconsciousness takes place in 1/240th part of a second, and that's 24 times as fast as it takes for the human nervous system to record pain. So theoretically, the executee should feel nothing. This is myself at Tennessee. The gentleman in a white shirt is the chief engineer for the state prison at Riverbend. The other gentleman is their chief electrician. This is a picture of me with the deputy warden of the Mississippi state prison at Parchman. This is their gas chamber. I was there that day to do an inspection. We found that the gasket was leaking on the chamber. Now the chamber. This is an engineering report on that. the gas chamber was designed by a gentleman named Eaton. It was made by the Eaton Metal Products Company in Salt Lake City. They designed and built all of the gas chambers in all of the states. The only one that was different was the one that was in your state here in Missouri. It was built by an inmate and designed by an inmate in the state. The interesting thing about these gas chambers is they're always operated at a negative pressure, which means that there's an exhaust fan that goes constantly, and there's a water valve on the side of the chamber. So if the chamber leaks, it's going to leak inward, and there's going to be air sucked through the water valve into the chamber so that any poison gas will remain inside the chamber. And I had designed a complete system for your state here in Missouri, but it was never built because while I was completing the design, your state passed new legislation authorizing lethal injection, and we swapped contracts. I received the contract to build your lethal injection machine, and I returned the contract for the gas chamber. This is a lethal injection machine. This is with only one set of syringes. These syringes are driven by a weighted piston, which you can see. There's 3 of them in there, and the 3 syringes that have fluid in them at this point. There were 2 outboard syringes, the ones on either end. We can go back to that other picture. There were 2 outboard syringes that have saline solution. They're merely used as bleed syringes to bleed any air out of the system. They're all connected to a manifold at the as you can see where they connect to that silver bar at the bottom, which all of the syringes are mounted with what's known in the medical profession as a Luer lock connection, which prevents the syringe from pulling away during the execution. The weighted piston drives the fluid into the individual. Now, there are 3 chemicals that we use for lethal injection. The first one is sodium pentothal. It puts the individual to sleep. It's an anesthetic. The second one is pancuronium bromide, which paralyzes his respiratory system, his lungs, if you will. And the third is potassium chloride, which seizes the heart. Under the law, we must have heart death in all cases, or else the person isn't deemed dead. At any rate, there's a problem with doing injections, and as you know, there've been a lot of issues with lethal injections throughout the country with ruptured veins and such. Most of the people that are being executed are former drug and alcohol abusers, and when the executions take place, if you're pushing the syringe by hand, you generally rupture the veins because they're weak. They don't hold much pressure. This system is designed to work with the actual blood pressure in the person who's being injected, and the weighted piston on the syringe pushes down on the plunger, and it works. Each time the heart beats, the blood pressure goes up, as you would imagine. It pushes the syringe back a little. When the blood pressure drops, more chemical goes in. Then it goes back up a little, and then more chemical goes in. It takes 1 minute to inject each chemical. There's a 1 minute time period between the chemicals, and the individual who has been injected is generally dead something between the time of 7 to 10 minutes. Now, the other picture that just came up, this is the system with all 6 of them, because there's a secondary system of backup, so that if the electrical system fails, you can then use mechanical system with pull rods in the back of the machine. The machine is controlled, and if you go to the next slide, by we need to go back. We need to go back to the one more forward. There. Click and play. There we go. This is the control module, and we call the lethal injection machine a LIM, standing for lethal injection machine, obviously. The control module, like the electrocution chair control, is designed for 2 people. 2 people push the button, the computer decide which one activates the system. It when there's three sets of lights. When the system is activated, and it cannot be stopped after the two buttons are depressed. The first light, the red light, which is first on, goes off, and the yellow light comes on. Now we have two lights, a red light and a yellow light. After the chemical has been completely injected into the individual, the green light comes on. Then there's a 1 minute time period, 1 minute wait before the start of the second sequence, which the red light is on, then the yellow light comes on, and then the green light, and it happens again with the last chemical, the antimonium bromide. So the system is fully automated, and with two people operating it, you don't know which person actually caused the execution. And the pull rods in the back, this system is controlled always on battery. The battery is charged by plugging it into the wall. So if the power goes off, the execution still continues because it has a backup battery. The backup battery runs the system all the time. And if the backup battery would have failed, then there are pull rods in the back that the executioners pull 2 of 6 rods, 2 for the first chemical, 2 for the second chemical, or 2 for the third chemical. And the only person that knows which control operated which rod is the person who sets the machine up, and he's no longer there. So nobody knows which person actually did the execution. This is the manual for the lethal injection machine. Again, all my manuals not only discuss the machines, how they operate, how to repair them, but it also tells you medically what's going on and why the execution is conducted in the manner it is. Now, there's been a lot of problems with lethal injection machine in the last few years because the European Union has refused to sell sodium pentothal to the United States if our departments of correction use them for execution purposes. Now, it's normally an anesthetic which is used for an operation, and if we can't get it for an operation, then people will not be operated on. So since they don't have capital punishment in the European Union, they have denied us the use of the chemical if we use it to kill people. Now, it's very interesting because a few years ago, a gentleman in Belgium committed murder. He was tried. He was sentenced to life in prison. He was in prison for 3 months, and he had his attorney petition the court to be euthanized because he didn't want to stay in prison, and he thought that it would be better if the state killed him. Now, it seems to me that that's a little hypocritical. If they criticize us for utilizing the chemical for executing people, then if they want to call it euthanizing a man, euthanasia is not quite the same thing. It's supposed to be done for people who are sick and who are ready to die, not people who have been sentenced to life and then just want to be executed. So as a result, we've had a lot of problems. They've been grinding up tablets of midazolam, which is not an anesthetic. It's a tranquilizer. And quite frankly, they've had trouble because it doesn't work. We have these chemicals. These chemicals were chosen for a reason. The first chemical puts the person to sleep. Each chemical, there's enough to kill the person if we don't administer the other chemicals. But first we put the person to sleep. Then secondarily, we paralyze his respiratory system. And then third, we give him the coup de grace, which seizes the pacemaker in the heart, the potassium chloride. It actually depolarizes the heart muscle. Now, since we can't get pentothal, nobody seems to know what they do. And because of my background and the fact that the Jewish organizations prohibit the states from dealing with me, they don't have anybody to guide them. And I've suggested it, but nobody has picked it up. We need to simply replace sodium pentothal with propofol. It worked very well on Michael Jackson, so it'll certainly work well in this application. And I've looked at the specifications and the tests that were run before it was released to be used as an anesthetic. it actually is better than sodium pentothal to act as an anesthesia. This is a picture taken at the Crime Museum in Washington, D.C., with one of my lethal injection control modules, as you can see. The museum is presently, unfortunately, it went out of business. It was only open for 2 years. This is about 5 years ago. And the control module is now in the museum in Las Vegas. Now we can go on to the next picture. Oh, all right, this is a picture of myself speaking at the Institute of Historical Review in California a number of years ago. Did we not have a picture of the electric chair, the Tennessee electric chair? Can you go back up again? One back here. This is a picture of the old Tennessee electric chair, the one we saw with the ghost in it. This is a picture of the electric chair in the same museum. This is now also in a museum in Las Vegas. And this is the Massachusetts helmet. This helmet was used on Sacco and Vanzetti. It was the helmet that you saw taken apart that was damaged because of many years usage. It was used 65 times. The last time in 1947, and it now also is in the same museum. Okay, you can move on.
Yeah. Okay. Let's see if I can do it. Doink. Okay, I'm coming. Screen. Start sharing.
So we're through the execution point here. Did we not want to have a question and answer period? Sorry, I didn't copy that.
Coming. Okay. Yeah, I can hear you. Yeah, she wants to see the ghost. There it is. Can you see it? Okay, the ghost is the face is here. I'm drawing a circle around the guy's face. I'll make it bigger. See the face?
According to Eastman Kodak, who analyzed and they examined this negative, they claim that there's as many as 5 different entities in the chair. If you look at the armrest, you can see the hand, you can see fingers sticking around the edges.
Here.
And why this picture work, and why we have a picture of something in the chair, I have a theory, but I don't know that it's true. And that theory is that it's similar to what we do when we make a slide. If we photograph something that's going to be a slide or a motion picture, the picture is developed twice. It's developed first as a black and white image, then the image is re-exposed to light, and then it's redeveloped in color. Now, what happened on this, remember, this picture was accidentally exposed for something less than a second by somebody who flipped the light switch on and off. And I believe that what happened is the ghosts anomaly or the spooks or whatever's in the chair would be a negative image. And we made that image more positive by reflashing it with light. Now, that's only an opinion. I don't know that to be true, but I believe that's what happened because there was nothing in any of the other 5 or 6 pictures that were taken, just the one that was accidentally flashed with light. If anybody is interested, I can supply them with a list of the people that were executed in that chair. Do you have any other questions? Would somebody repeat the question? Yes, because uh, in the past, it's been necessary to have an execution of one person who did that. In the East, there was one fellow who went around to most of the eastern states that did the electrocutions. It was kind of passed down from hand to hand, from electrician to an apprentice, and that way. In some of the other states, they had a god do the execution, but they kept his name secret. Uh, in some of the states, as in your own state, the warden of the prison is required to do the execution himself, but to find somebody that would do it. And your warden, Bill Armentrout, a very fine and very qualified man, he had 2 careers. He was a naval officer, and after he got out of the service, he went to work in the penal system, and he worked his way up to commissioner of correction here in Missouri. Um, he was very happy with the fact that I supplied 2 buttons. He and his assistant warden conducted the first. They pushed the button for the first lethal injection you had uh, in Jefferson City, and neither one of them were concerned because they don't know who did it and they weren't worried about it. But it takes its toll on people. You have to remember that the warden has generally had the person that is being executed. He's had care and custody, as the law calls it, of that inmate probably for something better than 10 years. I mean, we've had the longest person on death row was Carol Chessman in California. He was in there for 26 years before he was executed, which is unfortunate because normally, if you get life in prison, you're eligible for parole in 25 years, in 20 years, maximum 25, because that's considered to be a life sentence. And but most of these people have been in the care and custody of the warden for many years. It's like executing children, your own child. You've had to take care of this person, worry about whether he was sick, and make sure that he stayed alive for all that time. And then in the final end of the story, you have to push the button and kill him. And the fact that there's 2 buttons, it's a very simple circuit. It's like tossing a coin, but you don't know who did it. It's the same concept as they have with the firing squad. The only difference with the firing squad is that everybody on a firing squad has to shoot a live round, because if only one guy has a live round, and some people think that the other guys are shooting blanks, you can tell by looking at the rifles which rifle recoiled. and which rifle didn't. So, but that's the whole purpose of having 5 people on a firing squad. In this case, you got 2 people on an execution squad. Are there any other questions? Well, uh, there are a number of problems. It isn't easy to kill a human being, particularly to kill him mercifully, humanely. And I mean, we've had cases. There was a case in Massachusetts back in the 20s where somebody was executed, and 27 minutes after he was pronounced dead, his heart started beating again. Our human body is designed to keep itself alive. We have chemicals. We've got adrenaline. We've got sympathin, and these chemicals are made to restart the heart. They're made to cause you to come alive again, and that's why with the electric chair we run 2 joules of electricity for 2 full 1-minute periods to drive the chemicals out of the body and into the bloodstream so that there's nothing left to restart the heart. And it's not as easy as just putting somebody on the mat and electrocuting them. You got to have good connections on the electrodes. If you don't, this is one of the problems they had in Florida a number of years ago. The electrode, the voltage they use in Florida was too low. It was 500 volts. They had a bad connection in the electrode on the man's head. It was what they call a cold solder joint. It generated heat and it melted. And in the autopsy, you could actually see there was a burn on the top of his head. There was a burn at 45 degrees and there was a burn down here at 90 degrees. So the electrode melted. The problem is when that happened, the voltage reduced to something around 60 or 70 volts, and then it started back up again. And chances are they slowly boiled the man's blood as the voltage increased, and they actually set his head on fire where the electrode had separated. So it's not an easy job. You have to make sure you get good and very tight connections, and you have to make sure that your voltages are sufficient to seize the heart. You got to have at least 1500 volts, and then you also have to make sure that it's on long enough to drive all the chemicals out of the body and guarantee that the person will die. It's the same thing when we do the lethal injection. That last chemical is important because it depolarizes the heart, and there's no electricity left in the actual human or natural pacemaker in the heart that prevents it from restarting itself. So, I mean, it's not easy to do an execution, particularly if you want to do it painlessly and humanely. So that's why we have to go through all these things. Well, that's what we do with lethal injection. We give him an IV, and we try to do it very, very humanely. We try to put the person to sleep. We then stop him from breathing, and then we seize his heart. So that's what we try. That's what we try to do. If you try to do everything all at once, if you try to do something with one pill, it's probably going to cause problems. And even with the problems that we face, when we, at least we inject somebody, we usually give them an antihistamine at some point to stop them from coughing and choking because people do that. And it's been my experience that when we execute people, only only 75 to 80% of the time do we guarantee a completely uh, painless and a completely humane execution. 20% of the time, we don't know if the person felt anything or if there was a problem with the execution simply because it looks good. It doesn't necessarily mean it is good. And I don't think we can guarantee the execution 100% of the time because the human body and the human bodies differ. And even though when we do an execution, when we have a system to do it, we do it uh, for what should work every time, but it doesn't mean it does. And this is one of the reasons when after 40 years of being involved in this, I think we should stop executions because we can't do it right 100% of the time. Yeah, only to the extent that I believe if we're going to execute people, we should do it humanely. We're executing them because they did something wrong that was inhumane. And do we have the right to kill somebody for being inhumane if we're inhumane ourselves? Okay. No, I don't. I mean, I became involved only because I wanted to stop suffering. The people that were doing the executions had no choice. They had to do the executions with the crappy machinery that they had left over, something left over from the Dark Ages, and they also didn't know what they were doing. And that's why when I make the equipment, I also have a seminar that lasts a whole day, and we train the execution cadre, the people who are involved in the execution. We train them on what the execution's about, how the execution works, how the human body works, so that everything that's done is done properly and alleviates pain. And it makes it a lot easier for the people that are doing the execution because the people that are doing the executions don't enjoy killing people. They want it to go as easily and as smoothly as possible, and they want to be able to walk away saying the man didn't suffer. Hey, could somebody repeat that and broke up somewhat? Yes, I understand now. Yeah. The how did he find out about me first? That's the first question. Uh, I was asked by the steward at the Massachusetts State Prison to look at their electric chair. Uh, I My father worked in the Massachusetts system for over 40 years. He was a civilian employee. I used to go to work with them when I was a youngster. From the time I was 4 years old up until the time I was about 17 or 18 years old. I knew most of the prison officials. I knew a lot of the inmates. The inmates used to teach me how to do all kinds of things. I learned how to pick locks, how to crack safes. They were very happy to impart their knowledge. But at any rate, the steward of the institution, when Massachusetts passed the law enabling executions again, he knew the system was defective, and he asked my father. He said, "Would you have your son come in, and we'd like him to look at the equipment and evaluate it," which I did. And Massachusetts never did anything because the new law was struck down a couple of years later because it was being applied wrong and had nothing to do with the actual execution. But my name was passed around. All of these states were faced with the same problem. They have to do executions. Nobody knows how to do the executions. They got equipment that's 50 years old or more that doesn't work or probably won't work. They have to have it checked. So what happened is they passed my name around, and Bill Armentrout, the warden at the Missouri State Penitentiary, he had my name, and he had contacted me. I came out, I examined the gas chamber, and it had a leaky gasket on the door, which we replaced. They were actually, I had actually given him a quote to build an entirely new gas chamber. It involved the changing of the actual building that it was in. We had to put an exhaust fan in the top of the roof that evacuated the building and would turn the air in the building over 3 or 4 times in 1 minute. There were louvers in the wall that were automatically going to open, and if there was a leak, everybody would have to go to the wall and stand with their back against the wall. The air would come in from the outside, from their back, it would go up through the center of the room, and that would take care of the problem. If there was a leak of any kind, then nobody would get hurt. And it was a very expensive proposition. I mean, it was going to involve over $300,000 in the gas chamber and also the modifications in the building. And he had spoken with the legislature about the dangers involved, and he had asked the legislature to accept lethal injection because it was a common thing. The legislature did vote to accept lethal injection. Okay. Okay. Your legislature passed legislation for lethal injection. Bill Armentrout advised me of that. I gave him the contract back for the gas chamber. He gave me a new contract for lethal injection, which was several $100,000 cheaper than it would have been if we modified the gas chamber. And you no longer had the danger of anybody getting hurt. You also no longer had the danger. I mean, you had a 40-foot stack on your gas chamber, so that when you evacuated it, the high altitude winds would blow the air out over the river. And they actually had to wait on executions if the prevailing wind were blowing in toward Jefferson City, because they didn't want to blow poison gas into the center of the city. So it was a damn good idea that they changed their procedure. Yes. Say yeah. And Potosi, no, they moved the machine down at Potosi. They do everything themselves at Potosi. Now, you mean Mineral Point? Yes. I'm not. I haven't been involved with that. No. I I did such a good job for you people that you didn't need me anymore. Yeah, the gasket on the gas chamber leak. Things, the rubber gaskets get old and they have to be replaced. And it's very difficult to replace things like that, because if you get a leak, everything I use when I do something like that, I trace it. It's a life support system. I use hardware that's used in the space program and is used for deep sea submersibles, so that when I do something with the gas chamber, it's pressurized, it takes the pressure, and I have a certificate that goes back to the manufacturer that guarantees that nobody will get hurt, there will be no leak. And they have to do these things because they use them at 3 miles underwater on a submarine that they're investigating the ocean floor on, or somebody in the space program is flying around in a space capsule with the same hardware. So yes. Right. I forgot the name of it. It's in the I believe it's just called the Crime Museum. It's in Las Vegas. Yes. Well, I didn't work outside the country. I did have inquiries from outside the country. I had something from the Cayman Islands, and I also had inquiries from Canada, both places where they abolished capital punishment, and so they had no need of it. Most of my work, all of my work, was with states here in the United States, and it was with every state that had a requirement for capital punishment. And contrary to what most people would expect, anybody who had done this in the past, they normally charge exorbitant fees for this type of thing. When Massachusetts moved their electric chair from 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 Boston to Walpole back in 1957, Arthur D. Little, which is one of the largest engineering firms in the country, got the job. The state electrician disconnected the chair. My father and I moved the chair down to Walpole. The electrician put it back in. Arthur D. Little come in and flipped the switch and said it's working fine, and they got $137,000 for doing nothing. Uh, I work very fairly with the states. I don't charge, or I never charge exorbitant prices. I go on a rule of thumb that's required by contractors that work for the U.S. government and the military. I charge cost plus 20%, and 20% is a fair markup on any item. So when I dealt with the states, they always got a fair shake. And in many of the states, because I had problems with the Jewish organizations, and they threatened the prison wardens, and there was all kinds of problems, they were afraid to deal with me. I gave the states hardware, and I gave the states advice, and I gave the states help clandestinely, so they could conduct an execution without a problem, without anybody knowing. My house was firebombed. I had many death threats. While I was they filed spurious charges for me in Massachusetts for practicing as an engineer without a license. And you don't have to have a license unless you're certified blueprints for construction. And I actually had two Mossad agents following me around in Malden that I chased off at gunpoint. So yeah, they didn't actually do anything to me, but I don't think it was for want of trying. Okay. Okay, the picture we see in front of us is the entrance to the Auschwitz concentration camp in Poland. And over the door it says Arbeit macht frei, which means work makes you free. I was hired by the defense team for Ernst Rundle, who was on trial in Canada for publishing a pamphlet that you could purchase in England that said that 6 million really died. It dealt with the 6 million people that were allegedly murdered by the Germans during the Holocaust in gas chambers. And I was asked to testify. I was asked to investigate first the gas chambers, or the alleged gas chambers in Poland, and I was an official expert for the court. I had done this in the United States. I came very qualified. I'd been involved in 3 or 4 court cases where I had to do forensic work on execution equipment. So the same thing was true. I was certified by the Canadian court system. I was sent to Poland. I examined the facilities at 3 concentration camps: Auschwitz, Birkenau, which was sometimes called Auschwitz II. They're right next door to each other. And the third one was Majdanek, which is in Lublin, which is in the western part of Poland. And all of the facilities I examined, I found that none of them could have supported gas executions. It just wasn't possible with what was there. There was no equipment for it. There was no provision for it. There was no hardware for it. The alleged material that they used for the gassing was something called Zyklon B, which is chalk pellets that they absorb poison gas in, and there's not enough gas in it to fill a room, let alone fill a room big enough to kill 600 people. It's only used in small closets where they kill lice on clothing. As I say, I was sent to do an investigation. I didn't find that there was that any of these facilities could have supported it. There was nothing there that could have been removed. There were no holes in the walls for pipes or ventilators or anything else. And then on top of that, I took samples from the areas that were allegedly the gas chambers. And the Zyklon B, the hydrogen cyanide, forms a bond with iron that's permanent. It lasts for thousands of years. All of the building materials in Poland that are made with water, and that's concrete, bricks, water, and all that stuff, it's made with water. All the Polish water has a high iron content, a very high iron content. So if you were using hydrogen cyanide around this material with the high iron content, it would form a hard bond, chemical bond, and it would last from thousands, maybe millions of years. We really don't know, but we do know it lasts for more than 1,000 years. This is the reason why the gas is used in the gas chamber, because the hydrogen cyanide forms a permanent bond with the hemoglobin in the blood. The hemoglobin in the blood in the gas chamber carries oxygen to the lungs and to and from the body from the lungs. So if we form a bond with hydrogen, we form a bond with hydrogen cyanide with the blood, it's a permanent bond that won't break down, because the hemoglobin is iron. And that being the case, the blood of a person is permanently destroyed, and they'll never be able to breathe again after they breathe enough of the hydrogen cyanide. So the same thing is true. There would have been a remnant of hydrogen cyanide in the buildings, and there was none. I took samples. I brought the samples back to Massachusetts. I asked the state of Massachusetts for a recommendation for this type of thing. I had the laboratory do the analysis on it, and the laboratory found that there wasn't even a sufficient residue of hydrogen cyanide to show that they were properly delousing the buildings. You're supposed to use it for rats, for lice, etc. I don't think the Germans had enough of it, so they weren't using it even for normal pest control. But at any rate, there was no residue left. I came back. I testified in court. I wrote a report, which is part of the court system, and I submitted all the evidence, and and as I say, that was it. My report's available. It's available online. I assume it's still available at the court. I still have a copy of it. So, but it deals with all of the parameters of hydrogen cyanide, how they work, and why they didn't work in coal. So, all right. So, at any rate, let's look at some of these pictures. This is a picture of Auschwitz I and also Birkenau, which is second camp. The people at these camps were there for a purpose. They were there for slave labor. They all worked in the Buna rubber factory, which was owned by I.G. Farben. I.G. Farben at the Buna rubber factory made artificial rubber. They made it out of coal tar. So they used a lot of coal. They destructively distilled it. They wound up with coke on one hand and a lot of coal tar afterwards that they used to make the artificial rubber. They also made artificial gasoline with it. Germany had no access to rubber because they had been shut down well before the war by the primarily the United States, the same as Japan had been shut down from getting it because most of the rubber comes from the Malaysia area in the form of chicle, which is sap from the rubber trees. So at any rate, they had to make their own, and they did. They had expert chemists. Now these are some of the photographs. This is an electrified fence. You can see the barracks buildings. You can see they're all made out of brick. A lot of them are made out of brick, particularly the buildings that they said that they did the gas executions in. And you see the electrified fence. If we can move on, this is what they call the sauna buildings. This is where they deloused the clothing. It's where people took showers and they got their clothing back after the shower. And you can go on. Some of these buildings, these temporary buildings, were wood. This is an aerial photograph of both. It's both Auschwitz I and Auschwitz II. And this is the alleged gas chamber at Auschwitz I. It was originally a morgue. You can see the walls are made out of brick, and they're covered with plaster or with stucco, if you will. There's a memorial in the foreground with a flower and some kind of a set of steps that you can put something on. At the end of the room, you can see there's a small vestibule which you go out to your left and go out again to the street. The building was 80% underground. It was built into the side of a hill because it was a morgue, and it had to be kept cold. This is the crema section where they did the cremation. This is a furnace where they used to put the bodies in, and contrary to what most people think, in cremation you don't burn the bodies; you just evaporate all of the water and moisture out of them. But at any rate, there was no heat in the buildings. The only heat you got was from crematories. There was no heat in the building because they kept cadavers in them before they were to be cremated. And if you had the crematory was right adjacent, without a door, just an opening to the morgue. If you actually use the morgue, which is what they said they did for an execution chamber where they used hydrogen cyanide is extremely explosive and would have blown the building up. So, as I say, there were a lot of reasons why this couldn't have happened. Now, this is a picture of Dachau after we liberated Dachau. The American soldiers, and that says that's at the top. It says gas time actually, and that's the alleged gas chamber. Now there was something interesting about the alleged gas chamber. We can move on to the next picture. It's a beautiful room that they have for the so-called gas chamber. The only problem with it is that, like Auschwitz, it's got floor drains. When you put floor drains in a gas chamber and they're connected to the sewer line, the poison gas goes out through the floor drains and winds up in the camp sewer system and bubbles up through people's toilets. So it's not a good idea to have floor drains in a gas chamber. They weren't gas chambers, they were morgues. Yes. Oh, all right. I said this alleged gas chamber, as the same as the alleged gas chamber at Auschwitz. Uh, it had floor drains that were tied into the sewer system of the camp. If you conducted a gas execution, the gas would get into the floor drains, or would wind up bubbling up into the main sewer system. The catch basins of the camp would have eventually bubbled up into people's toilets. So it's not a good idea to put floor drains in, and all of these facilities had them. But they had them for a reason, because they were morgues. They did autopsies in there, and that's how they washed the rooms up. So this room here at Dachau is a very interesting location. It says Gaskammer, which means gas chamber. It's also known as a Brausebad, which means shower room. It was presumably disguised as a shower room, so they had gas coming out of shower heads in the building, which never happened. But they said that it was never used as a gas chamber. The people that were supposed to be gassed there, they sent to two other locations. Presumably, they sent to Mauthausen in Austria, and they sent to Hadheim Castle, also in Austria. Neither one of those places had gas chambers, incidentally, and neither one of the facilities had places where you could have had a gas chamber. Yes? Okay. Uh, the people that were supposedly to be executed at Dachau, for some reason, were sent to two other facilities: Mauthausen, which is a concentration camp in Austria, and also Hadheim Castle, which was a castle in Austria. Neither one of them had any facilities that could have been used as a gas chamber. So none of that happened. There was no place for really to send them. But I found out something very interesting about this alleged gas chamber at Dachau. Could we see the picture again showing the whole gas chamber? This room here, it's a beautiful room. It's all ceramic tile. It has technically shower heads on the ceiling. You can see the shower heads. Of course, they weren't shower heads when I investigated them, but I investigated them. I climbed up on top of the alleged gas chamber, and I found that they were just pieces of sheet metal that were made in the shape of a shower head and embedded in the ceiling. There's a high pressure steam line that runs over this facility, which would have caused the gas to blow up because it's explosive if they ever used it for a gas chamber. But of course, the sign says they never did. I saw this on my second trip to Europe. Ernst Zundel had sent me over there to examine this facility and several other facilities in Germany and Austria, which I did. I took, as I did in Auschwitz and Birkenau and Majdanek, I brought a draftsman with me. We took measurements and we made drawings that were in my report, marking not only what was in the room, but also where we took the samples to examine to see whether or not there was any hydrogen cyanide. So I took dimensions here as well. And a few weeks later, after I had returned, I was talking to Ernst Zundel, and he said, "Would you like a copy of the congressional record?" Because the minute they liberated the camp, they brought members of Congress over. Eisenhower did, to show them that this is what a gas chamber looked like. So they came in, and one thing our Congress does, it's damn good at keeping records. It may not run the country properly, but one of the things it does, it keeps records. They took all the same measurements I did, and they voted on them after they were done. So these measurements are legal because they were read. They were measured by officials, and they were part of the congressional record. Well, I read the congressional record, and it didn't match any of my dimensions. So I got back to Ernst Zundel, and I said, "What the hell is going on? Nothing matches here." Well, he produced a newspaper article. It was very interesting. Two American soldiers who were carpenters said they were brought in by Eisenhower to build a bogus or a phony gas chamber to show the members of Congress when they got there. Well, apparently what happened is they did. And after they finished, and after Congress got through, they tore the gas chamber down and they built a really good permanent one with all this ceramic tile. And this is actually a beautiful room. But none of the dimensions match. And apparently what happened is they rebuilt a better alleged gas chamber, but it didn't match the original dimension. So what we have is we had somebody wasn't smart enough to measure it before they tore it down and built a new one. So the gas chamber at the alleged gas chamber at Dark Hollow was actually a phony gas chamber that was built by Eisenhower for Congress and to show the world what something that didn't exist. So, okay, you can move on.
Okay.
Okay, we're back here with this photo. This is in Birkenau, sometimes called Auschwitz II. There was the original gas chamber was in what was called Kremmer 1. Kremmer means where they have the ovens to do the cremations. It's a crematory. That's in Auschwitz 1. At Auschwitz 2 or Birkenau, there were 4 crematories. There were Kremmer 1, Kremmer 2, Kremmer 3, Kremmer 4, and Kremmer 5. And when I got there, Kremmer 2 and Kremmer 3 had been dynamited and were just a big mess. I had to go down inside under the dynamited buildings to get samples. Okay. It's been alleged that they were dynamited by the Germans before they left, although it doesn't make sense. It seems to make more sense that the Russians probably did it simply to get rid of the buildings. Kremmer 4 and Kremmer 5, there was nothing left. They were buildings that were on slab. Now 2 and 3 and 4 and 5, the 2 and 3 were mirror images of each other, and 4 and 5 were. But 4 and 5 were just a brick building with windows that was built on slab. It apparently or probably had a couple of cremation furnaces in it, and maybe a shower room. But I never got to see them because after the war, the Polish people cannibalized the buildings for building materials, and all that was left was a slab and a few bricks. So there was stuff left back at Kremmer 2 and 3, and that's the buildings that were dynamited and blown up. And as I say, I got underneath, I removed samples. So I had been in the sections of the building I had been in. I was in places that nobody had been in since 1945, since the war ended. Now we're back here looking at a picture of the alleged gas chamber at Auschwitz 1. You'll notice that there's at the end of the building, there's a vestibule with the door open. You can see the light coming in, and that goes out, and there's a right turn going out to the outside. Okay, this building was all morgue. You can see at intervals, you can see grates in the floor where they used to wash the floor down. You can also see, as you come down, there are lines on the floor where there were partial walls built. And to the left, we have a doorway here that we have an opening. It's a square arch that has no door in it. And there was never a need to put a door because this was the morgue. They brought the bodies. The crematory was right next door through that door. And of course, if they conducted a gas execution there, they would have blown the building up. None of the lighting was explosion-proof lighting. None of the switches are explosion-proof. And you can see there's a mark on the floor there that looks like it comes from that wall halfway across, or 2/3 of the way across the room. There were 4 of them. They were baffles that were put in, and even though this was still a morgue, they put these baffles in because they also used it as a bomb shelter. And if they were bombed, the baffles break up the concussion. So if you're in hiding behind a wall, you don't. It's like a muffler on a car. It's the same concept. So, as I said, there are no. This is a picture of the shower room, and this is at Majdanek. And You can see there's no gasket on the door, so it's not a gas chamber. You can see the short way through. You walk through with a small shower room. You can walk through to the other side. Uh, Basically, what they did is they took the people's clothes, sent it through the shower room. In most of the facilities where they did the delicing, they didn't use hydrogen cyanide anyway because they had to buy it. Most of the stuff, most of the locations, they used steam cleaners, which killed the lice, and they also used to use microwave. The Germans actually invented microwave facilities for killing lice. So, but they didn't have to buy any any materials. They didn't have to buy any poisons to kill the lice because they could do it with high pressure. They could do it with steam, and they could do it with microwave. So anyway, so let's go back and get to the other picture. Okay, this is another crematory. And can we go back up a little? I want to go back to Auschwitz I. There, right here. So you can see the Russians, they said the Russians rebuilt the gas chamber after the war. Well, all the Russians did was take down those three-quarter walls that went from one side, then the other side, and then the other side, which were just baffles to make it better in case there was a bombing, which there was never a bombing of Auschwitz, so it never was a problem. But you can see the building is just one big open room. None of the lighting was exposed. None of the switches were. It would have been a nightmare if they used it for poison gas. Now, the Russians cut some holes in the ceiling in this building, and they said that they threw the Zyklon B pellets down onto the floor, and that's how they used it. The problem is the building had no heat, and in the middle of the Polish winter, the temperature in the building was less than 20. And in order to sublimate the gas and have it come out of the Zyklon B pellets, you have to have a stove and you have to be blowing hot air through it that's in excess of 78 degrees. So if you had gas and the temperature is down at 15 degrees, the gas condenses on the ground. So you couldn't gas anybody with it, just be on the floor. So as I say, none of these places even lent themselves to being used for gas execution facilities at all. Okay, now you can go forward again. This is a picture of somebody being disinfected with DDT. Now this is the outside of the gas chamber, the alleged gas chamber at Kreml 1 in Auschwitz. There's the door that we were looking at from the other side. You'll see that large chimney up in the back of the in the back. That chimney was built by the Russians, probably because they thought there should have been a chimney there. It never was connected to anything because all of the crematories, all of the furnaces had their own chimneys that went directly up to the ceiling above them. So that actually had no use. It was supposed to be connected underground, but it never was. It was just something that the Russians built to make the place look nice. It suddenly appeared in 1945. It's on none of the aerial photographs that were taken before the Germans surrendered. But at any rate, as I say, that's the outside of the alleged gas chamber, normally known as Kreml 1 at Auschwitz I. Okay, you can move on. This is a picture of a gas chamber used in the United States. It was made by Eaton. Can make it a little smaller, please. You can see on the right, there's a lever that operates the butterfly inside that dumps the hydrogen cyanide pellets. They're either sodium cyanide or potassium cyanide into a solution of 7% sulfuric acid. That's underneath the chair. This round thing on the right hand side that's just got the little red wheel on it it's a reverse gas valve that allows air to bubble into the chamber so that the chamber will be operated at negative pressure and it wouldn't leak. You can see the large wheel on the door itself and the large gasket around the door that when that's pulled in, it seals it so the gas doesn't leak. So a gas chamber is a fairly complicated device. Most of our gas chambers have plumbing underneath them where they dump the acid into a sink and it runs down under the chamber. The pellets are put in manually, and when the butterfly turns, it's nothing more than a plate that the pellets are on. When it's turned, the pellets fall into the acid. So it's a gas chamber like that was designed by Eaton. Was a fairly complicated device, and it had to be to make sure it worked right, to make sure that nobody got hurt. Uh, the other thing is that we generate all our gas in the chambers here in the United States because if we relied on Zyklon B, like the Germans were supposed to have, we wouldn't have had enough gas to kill anybody. There's not enough gas. There's enough gas to kill lice. They pump the hot air into a chamber and they leave it there for 8 or 10 hours and they kill the lice. We have to do an execution. We have to have a much higher level concentration. And in order to kill these people, they have to be executed and dead within 10 minutes. And then we have to spend 8 or 10 hours evacuating the chamber as it is. We then have to go in wearing rubber suits and masks, generally oxygen masks, and we have to take the bodies, we have to ruffle the hair on the head, we have to ruffle the pubic hair, and we have to make sure that there's no residual gas caught anyplace. Then we have to wash the bodies down with either ammonia or with chlorine bleach to neutralize the residue of the gas. It both condensed on the body and it also was breathed and expelled out from the pores of the body because the person breathed the hydrogen cyanide gas. So there's a lot of work. If you didn't do that, the undertaker would perhaps die dealing with the body. Yes. Okay. Okay. I'll wrap it up. All right. This is the picture we have on the screen now is this is the alleged gas chamber in Auschwitz was really a joke. Here's a real American gas chamber. You can see the complexity of it and what you'd have to go through to run it. Can you proceed?
Oh, proceed.
Yes. Okay. That's another American gas chamber, slightly different door. That needs to have its gas. That needs to have the gasket replaced. You see, it's rusted down there, and the gasket is missing. You can see the lever on the right that operates it. This is a location in one of the concentration camps where they said they used bottle gas, gas in tanks. This is a picture. This is a picture of the alleged gas chamber one at Auschwitz. This is drawn by my draftsman after we took all the measurements and after we returned. Keep going. Okay, that's where I was in prison in Germany. I was put in prison in Germany for testifying in Canada. There were no gas chambers. That's Mannheim prison. I was in there for 3.5 months. This is a steam facility for delousing, which they use most of the time. They either use steam or they use microwave delousing facilities. They didn't have all that much Zyklon B, even though they alleged that they did. Yes. Okay. Okay. All right. We can pull the plug at this point then. I thank everybody for listening and giving me the opportunity to speak to them. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.